How did these two young lovebirds go from being like this to, well, this? Well, you can blame it on time travel. A whole lot of time travel. That's right, I'm talking about Dark, the series that is the definition of complicated. So I thought, why not lose my mind by binge watching the entire series and creating a recap video? Let's get right into it. The very first episode of Dark takes us to June 21st, 2019, where we see Michael Conwald committing. Yep, that's a great way to start off a TV show. Before hanging himself, Michael writes a letter that says, "Do not open before November 4th, 10:13 p.m. Oh, that's oddly specific. Now jump forward to November 4th, 2019, where we meet Jonas, Michael's 16-year-old son. Jonas is a likable, caring kid, but he's extremely troubled after his father's death. We also meet Hannah, Michael's cunning wife, who's doing her morning cardio with Ulrich Nielsen, an officer at the Winden Police Department. Ulrich is a decent married man who loves his family, but not enough to be loyal to his wife, apparently. Sure, it does seem like Hannah has moved on, but Jonas is clearly having a hard time. But Peter Doppler, an overall nice guy, and also a therapist, is trying to help Jonas. Oh, also, we briefly see Ines, Michael's mother, who's interestingly holding on to her dead son's letter. Yeah, it seems like Hannah and Jonas don't even know about this letter. Next, we meet Ulrich's family. There's his wife, Katharina, who loves spending time with her children, and yes, she has zero idea that her husband is cheating on her with Hannah. There's Ulrich and Katharina's oldest and slightly rebellious son, Magnus, their lovely daughter, Martha, and finally, there's Mikkel, the youngest and most notorious one in the group. Moving on, Jonas has returned to his school after a long time because, he was traumatized. But his good and rich friend, Bartosz Tiedemann, tries to make him feel comfortable. Moving on, we jump on to the police station where Jürgen and his wife, Ulla, are pissed off at the police department because their son, Eric, has disappeared. There, we also meet Police Chief Charlotte Doppler, Peter's incredibly smart wife, who loves helping the people of Winden. But right now, she's clearly having a tough time with Eric's parents. Back at the school, we meet Francesca, Peter and Charlotte's daughter, a bright student who also loves smoking weed, like every genius out there, right? Anywho, Katharina, who's also the principal, hosts an assembly meeting. While Katharina talks about Eric's disappearance with the students, Jonas finds out that Bartosz is dating Martha. And let's just say our boy isn't exactly thrilled about it because he likes Martha. Ooh, a love triangle. You just love it. Moving on, Ulrich visits his mother Jana, who is usually lost in her thoughts. Anyway, Jana tells Ulrich that she saw a creepy hooded man in the forest. Real quick, until we learn the man's true identity, we'll just call him the stranger. Apparently, Ulrich's brother, Mads Nielsen, also disappeared 33 years ago, just like how Eric has gone missing. Jana thinks there's some connection between the disappearances of both boys. Interesting. At the same time, we see Eric, yes, Eric, locked inside a room, which has a TV and a torture chair? Yeah, not exactly my kind of Airbnb. Elsewhere, while Katharina finds Hannah's hair in her husband's hoodie, Hannah gives a massage to Alexander, Bartosz's cocky and shady father, and the owner of the Winden nuclear power plant. He's tense because the plant is about to close in a year, and the government is moving away from nuclear energy. Later that night, Jonas meets Bartosz, Martha, and Magnus in the forest. Apparently, Bartosz wants to find Eric's stash of weed, which he usually hides in a cave. Maybe search for your classmate instead of his weed and getting stoned? No? Alright. And yeah, Magnus brings Mikkel with him on his illegal treasure hunt. Jonas first talks to Martha, and we learn that something happened between them last summer. But before they could take it any further, Michael disappeared and Jonas stopped coming to school. Moving on, while these kids look for their drugs, the adults gather at the school to discuss Eric's disappearance. In the meeting, we meet Bartosz's sensitive and introverted mother, Regina, who argues with Katharina about how to deal with this entire situation. And at the same time, Helga, a former cleaner at the Winden nuclear power plant, arrives at the meeting. Helga is a troubled, childlike man, and he's also Peter Doppler's father. After arriving at the meeting, Helga says that something is about to happen again, but since he's mentally ill, no one takes him seriously, and as it turns out, that's a big mistake. Now, while Ines opens Michael's letter at exactly 10:13 p.m., the kids get deep into the forest. Francesca also shows up there for the free weed. As they fight over the weed, a mysterious sound comes from the caves, and they all start running. They make it out of the forest, but Mikkel gets lost. The parents arrive on the scene with the police, and Ulrich searches the cave for Mikkel, but the boy is nowhere to be found. The next day, the police find body of a child, but Ulrich confirms it's not Mikkel. This child is wearing clothes from the 80s, and there's an old Walkman near his body as well. Meanwhile, Eric gets tortured by a mysterious hooded man in a locked room. The second episode kicks off by revealing the face of the stranger, and it looks like this man is in his early 40s and he's roughed up, like he hasn't showered in months. Anywho, he's looking at the search party trying to find Mikkel. Elsewhere, we see Charlotte examining the dead boy's body, while Ulrich finds a locked door deep inside the cave where Mikkel went missing. Moving on, we meet Ulrich's emotionally distant father, Tronte, who's secretly wiping blood off his sweater. Ulrich's family is clearly worried, and Martha and Katharina discuss how Ulrich's brother Mads also disappeared when he was about the same age as Mikkel. Back at the station, Ulrich tells Charlotte about the door in the caves, which leads to the nuclear plant. Ulrich thinks Mikkel must have entered the plant through that door, so he asks Charlotte to get a search warrant so they can look for Mikkel inside the plant. Ulrich confirms that every child, Eric, Mikkel, and his brother Mads, disappeared near that power plant and the cave. Oh, and something weird is clearly happening at the power plant because Alexander asks Jürgen, yeah, he works at the plant, to get rid of something before the police arrive. Meanwhile, the stranger arrives at the Winden Hotel, which, by the way, is owned by Regina. The guy gets a room in the hotel, and after getting a much-needed shower, he opens up his briefcase and takes out a device. It's a clockwork device with 3 cylinders and some switches. Meanwhile, Jonas is spending some time in the room where Michael used to paint. There, he comes across something strange. It's a detailed map of the Winden caves. At the same time, Eric is being tortured by the hooded man inside the locked room. Seriously though, how many of these hooded people are there? Anywho, Ulrich now reaches the nuclear plant, but he doesn't get the search warrant. He still requests Alexander to help him search for his boy, but the rich doesn't let him in. Next, we see Bartosz, who is clearly pissed because Martha hasn't been answering his calls. He opens that packet of weed, which honestly is the reason why Mikkel went missing. Inside the packet, Bartosz finds a phone, which is clearly Eric's, but it's locked. Back at the station, Ulrich confirms that Jürgen not only works for the plant, but that he was there the night Eric disappeared, thinking that he might know something about Mikkel as well. Ulrich tracks down his place, but he finds nothing except some drugs stashed by Jürgen, so he leaves. Next, we see that the hooded man who was torturing Eric is dragging the boy's body in the forest. That evil bastard. On the same night, the lights across town start flickering and the birds start dropping dead on the ground. The guy at the hotel is looking at newspaper clippings about Mikkel, and right then, we see Mikkel getting out of the cave. He runs out of the forest and reaches his house, but something's different. And it becomes clear when Mikkel sees a teenage Ulrich living in the house. He also sees a young Katharina, and that's when Mikkel looks down at the newspaper, which has the date of 1986. Yep, the boy has time traveled to the past. The third episode picks up in 1986, and Mikkel enters the house that, well, would be his house in the future. Man, that is so weird. There he meets a younger version of Jana, who starts crying about Mads. So Mikkel gets scared and leaves. On the same day, we meet a young Ines, who is a nurse at the hospital. Then we see a teenage Charlotte, who, for some reason, is fascinated by dead birds. Apparently, only a month has passed since Mads' disappearance, and Egon Tiedemann, the chief of the Winden police, and a simple, grounded man, is looking at the boys' posters. Then we also meet Claudia, Egon's ambitious and brilliant daughter, who has just become the first female director in the Winden nuclear power plant. And then we see a teenage Regina, who doesn't give a crap about her mother's new job. Next, we see Mikkel finding his way into the Winden high school, where he also meets a teenage Hannah, hanging out with Katharina. Hey, Katharina, your future self is worried sick about the boy who's standing right in front of you. Meanwhile, Claudia arrives at the plant and meets a younger Helga Doppler. It seems like Helga is in his 40s at this time, and he clearly has a thing for Claudia. Moving on, Mikkel is still clueless that he's traveled back into the past, so he goes to the station where he meets Egon. Mikkel wants Egon to find his family, and the boy tells Egon that Ulrich is his father. Clearly, the old man thinks it's a dumb joke. Mikkel is bruised up, so Egon heads out to meet teenage Ulrich anyway, thinking Ulrich must have beaten up Mikkel and forced him to play this sick prank on Egon. Before heading out, Egon tells Mikkel that he'll call the hospital and someone will be here soon to take a look at his injuries. Back at the power plant, Claudia meets middle-aged Tronte, Ulrich's father, who is a reporter and, yeah, is having an affair with Claudia. Like son, like father, eh? Back at the station, Mikkel sees the missing report for Mads Nielsen laying on the table. While he tries to make sense of everything by looking at the report, middle-aged Ines walks in and promises to take care of him. Around the same time, Egon meets a teenage Ulrich and confronts him for sending Mikkel to the station. Obviously, Ulrich has no idea what this crazy old dude is talking about, so he asks Egon to stop messing around and find his missing brother instead. Next, we meet Bernd Doppler, Helga's father, who is retiring from the position of director of the power plant. Bernd is hiding something about the plant, and Claudia wants clarity before taking on the new responsibility. While Bernd takes Claudia deep into the forest and makes her climb down into a cave, middle-aged Ines interacts with Mikkel, who tells her that he's from the future. Yeah, he ain't lying. Back in the caves, Claudia sees loads of canisters, possibly containing lethal nuclear waste. Later that night, the strange phenomenon happens again. The birds start dropping dead, and the lights across Winden start flickering. Now back in 2019, middle-aged Ulrich enters the caves, and at the same time, Mikkel, in 1986, also enters the caves. Ulrich tries to open the steel door leading to the power plant, but then he hears Mikkel's voice, who's calling for help in 1986. Finally, we see an old man building the same device the stranger took out of his briefcase in the second episode. The fourth episode takes us back, or shall I say forward, to 2019. Anyway, in 2019, Jonas is looking at the Winden Caves map, which mentions some sort of crossing. Now we also meet Elisabeth, the younger daughter of Charlotte and Peter. Elisabeth is deaf, but that doesn't stop her from being a pain in the to her sister, Francesca. We then see Jonas walking into the caves, and the stranger watches him from a distance. Around the same time, Charlotte brings in the dead birds for examination. And you guys remember how teenage Charlotte was obsessed with the birds dropping dead from the sky in 1986? Well, Charlotte thinks whatever killed those birds in 1986 is killing them again in 2019. She continues the investigation on Mikkel, Eric, and of course the dead kid they found in the forest. During the investigation, Charlotte learns that there was some kind of red dirt near the dead body of the young boy, but the police can't seem to find the same red dirt in the forest or anywhere else in Winden. Later on that day, Charlotte looks at a recording from the wildlife camera that was installed on the forest road. That's actually pretty clever. And in the recording, Charlotte sees that the night Mikkel went missing, Peter's car drove past the spot where police found the dead boy. Elsewhere, Peter can be seen clearing the same red dirt from his car. You know, something's pretty fishy with Peter. Elsewhere, Magnus follows Francesca into the forest because he still thinks that she's somehow connected to Mikkel's disappearance. And then she picks up an envelope full of cash that she must have hidden in the forest. While that's going on, Charlotte questions Benny, a transgender who's having an affair with Peter. Charlotte wants to confirm if Peter was with Benny on the night Mikkel disappeared, but Benny says that they haven't seen Peter for over a year. Oh gosh, where exactly were you that night, Peter? Later, Charlotte goes to the Doppler's family hunting cabin, where she sees tire tracks and the red dirt. And near the cabin, she finds an underground bunker, but before she could investigate any further, she gets a call that Ulrich has broken into the nuclear plant. Back at the school, Magnus confronts Francesca for hiding a pile of cash in the forest. She confirms that she wants to use this money to get out of this town. She also knows about her parents' screwed up relationship. And then it finally happens. The love-hate chemistry between Magnus and Francesca leads to a relationship. Yep, we all saw that coming. Later we see Elisabeth strolling around the forest because her parents couldn't pick her up from school on time. And at the same time, Charlotte picks up Ulrich from the power plant, who clearly got a beating from the security for breaking into the plant. Alexander doesn't press any charges on Ulrich, but he's still pissed. Moving on, Charlotte knows Ulrich is desperate to find Mikkel, but she tells Ulrich that he still shouldn't pull crazy stunts like breaking into a building. Meanwhile, Charlotte gets a call from Peter who tells her that Elisabeth wasn't in school and isn't home either. They search for Elisabeth everywhere, but she doesn't return home and is nowhere to be found. And since Mikkel and Eric went missing not too long ago, everyone thinks Elisabeth disappeared as well. But later that day, Elisabeth walks in her home and is unharmed. Charlotte asks Elisabeth exactly where she was all day, and she tells Charlotte that she met a man while walking home from school, and she was with him. That is not cool, Elisabeth. Anywho, Elisabeth says that the man she was with was Noah, and she says that Noah gave her a gold pocket watch, which, according to Noah, belonged to Charlotte. On the same night, the stranger walks into Jonas's room while he's sleeping, and he marks something on the Winden Caves map and leaves. You know, that's not mysterious at all. And the next day, we see the hooded man, possibly the one who tortured Eric, picking up Jessen, another kid from the forest. Seriously, how many kids are you gonna kill? You sick, sick man. The fifth episode episode begins in 2019, with the entire Winden town going nuts over Jessen's disappearance. So Charlotte questions Elisabeth about the Noah person and what he looks like. She also asks Peter where he was the night Mikkel went missing, but Peter lies and says that he was in the office. What you up to, Pete? Next, we see the stranger picking up his device in the hotel room, and he's getting ready to go somewhere. That's when we see Bartosz, who's still holding on to Eric's phone. Seriously, man, that's evidence. Just hand it over to the police. And anyway, Eric's phone starts ringing, and Bartosz just answers the call, and guess what? The man on the other side of the phone knows Bartosz's name, and he introduces himself as Noah. Meanwhile, Hannah goes to meet Katerina. Nah, we all know she's really wanted to see Ulrich. Well, that was a mistake because Katerina hugs Hannah and realizes she's wearing the same perfume she smelled on Ulrich's hoodie the first episode. Yeah, you're dude. Back at the hotel, the stranger tells Regina that he won't be back for a few days, but he still wants to keep the room. Yeah, money's not a problem for this man. But before leaving, the stranger asks Regina to deliver a package for him, and this package is addressed to none other than Jonas, who is right now getting stoned with Bartosz and playing video games. While hanging out, Bartosz tells Jonas that he's meeting up with Eric's drug dealer later that day. That's right, he's talking about Noah, who might have said to Bartosz that he's a drug dealer. You know, I'm pretty sure that's a lie, Bartosz. Anyway, Jonas agrees to accompany Bartosz to meet Noah. Now, we're back in 1986, where a minister from St. Christopher's Church meets Mikkel in the hospital, and surprisingly, this man introduces himself as Noah. That's right, he is the Noah. And no, Noah doesn't harm or kidnap Mikkel, he just simply talks to the boy about God. While Ulrich ends his affair with Hannah in 2019, teenage Hannah in 1986 starts getting obsessed with teenage Ulrich. But the teenage Ulrich is serious about maintaining a relationship with Katerina. Around the same time, the Child Protection Services decides to put Mikkel in a children's home until his parents call. Well, we know that ain't happening like ever. Back in 2019, the stranger meets Jonas at Michael's grave, and he tells Jonas that Michael saved his life once. And that's how the stranger knows Michael, and that's how he knows Jonas. Meanwhile, in 1986, we meet Sebastian, Hannah's father, who honestly seems like a nice guy, unlike Hannah. You know, I really don't know why. I can't put a finger on it, but I sort of hate her. Teenage Hannah then sees Mikkel sitting on a bench and starts talking to him. Now, while these two start to hit it off, Ulrich and Katerina make their relationship official. And after a while, Hannah peeks through the window and sees Ulrich and Katerina making out. She's such a weirdo. Back in 2019, Jonas is supposed to go with Bartosz to meet Eric's dealer, but he ditches Bartosz to see Martha's play. Good call, Jonas. Apparently, Martha called Jonas instead of Bartosz and invited him to see her play. After the play, Jonas asks Martha why she called him and not Bartosz. Well, guess what? Martha says she wants to get together with Jonas, and the two lovebirds kiss right after. Meanwhile, Bartosz meets up with Eric's supposed dealer alone, and the guy is none other than Noah, who previously met Mikkel in 1986. And now he's in 2019 meeting up with Bartosz. I'm sure he isn't a drug dealer, but he's definitely gotta be a bad guy. Oh, and speaking of bad people, teenage Hannah lies to her father in 1986 and says that she saw Ulrich forcing himself on Katrina. Sebastian then takes Hannah to Egon, and she says the same thing. Sure, it's alright to be jealous, but this? That's no way to go about things. Now, teenage Ulrich gets arrested by the police in 1986, and in 2019, Jonas receives a parcel from the stranger. In the box, Jonas finds an orb light and a Geiger counter, which is basically a device to track nuclear radiation, but that's not it. The parcel also contains the letter that Michael wrote before he died. Wait, wasn't Enos holding on to Michael's letter? So how did the stranger come across the same letter? I'm sure we'll get that answer soon. Moving on, Jonas opens the letter and reads that his father was Mikkel, and how he became Michael after getting stuck in 1986? What the actual I mean, how do you even process that information? That's like unreal, man. Moving on, in 1986, the stranger meets H.G. Tannhaus, a scientist who's an expert on black holes and a clockmaker. Things start to get more intense for everyone in the 6th episode. It picks up with a small flashback scene where we see a teenage Regina tied up to a tree in the forest, and it seems like teenage Katharina and teenage Ulrich did that to her. That's pretty damn evil. Moving on, we return to 2019, where middle-aged Ulrich is going through the old police records of Mads' disappearance. He's just trying to find some connection between the disappearance of Mads and Mikkel. While this is happening, Katarina is starting to lose her mind because she's just sitting around and waiting for Mikkel to return. And at the same time, Regina learns that she has cancer. See? Just messed up all around. Jonas, on the other hand, finds the new directions marked by the stranger on the Winden Caves map. Then we see Ulrich visiting his father's house, where he asks Tronte where he was the night Mads disappeared, and exactly where he was when Mikkel went missing. Jana steps in and lies to Ulrich that Tronte was home on both nights, but once Tronte leaves, Jana tells Ulrich that Tronte was with Claudia on the night that Mads disappeared, and he wasn't home the night Mikkel disappeared as well. Then Jana says that the last person to see Mads before he disappeared was Regina. Then we cut to Jonas picking up every item he got from the stranger and entering the caves. At the same time, Katharina goes through Ulrich's phone records and finds out that her asshole husband has been calling Hannah. Oh, speaking of the asshole, Ulrich asks Regina about what happened the night Mads went missing. Regina explains that Mads was walking her home after Katharina and Ulrich tied her up in the forest, but Mads left her after making sure that Regina was fine. Sounds like Mads was a really good kid. Anyway, Ulrich says to Regina that she isn't a saint either, because she accused him of Katharina. Regina is obviously clueless about all this, and she implies that it must be the sly teenage Hannah who reported Ulrich to the police out of jealousy. But then Hannah framed Regina, so she gets all the heat from Ulrich and Katharina. You know, that's pretty spot on, Regina. Ulrich never expected that it was Hannah who got him arrested back then because, you know, he's an idiot. And after finally learning the truth, Ulrich storms out of the hotel. Later, while Jonas finds the path the stranger marked inside the cave, Ulrich confronts Hannah for framing him 33 years ago. And at this time, Peter and Tronte are at the underground bunker, and they're waiting for something to happen. Back in the caves, Jonas finds a small gate that has Sic Mundus Creatus Est written on it, which basically means, thus the world was created. He opens the gate and goes inside. Back in town, the lights start flickering, and it seems Peter and Tronte are recording the exact time this happens. Jonas has reached the other end of the gate, and in the town, Ulrich is looking at one of Mads's old pictures, where his brother was wearing the same t-shirt that was found on the young boy's dead body. Next, we see Jonas arrive in 1986, and he's walking on the forest road, being confused as hell, and then a van stops by. And guess who's sitting in the van? That's right, it's teenage Hannah and her father, Sebastian. Yeah, that little sicko right there, that's your mother, Jonas. Obviously, Jonas realizes that he traveled to the past, but he doesn't say anything. Hannah and Sebastian leave, thinking Jonas is just some weirdo walking by the road in the middle of the night. Back in 2019, the middle-aged Ulrich tries to make sense of everything. Like why the dead boy was wearing the same shirt as Mads. So he decides to take a final look at the boy's dead body, and then he realizes that the dead boy is in fact, wait for it, his brother Mads. Jeez. What is happening? Mads disappeared in like 1986 and his body was found in 2019, and it's not even decomposed. Like, in what world is this normal? The 7th episode kicks off by showing us the strange room with the torture chair, and yeah, there's another child trapped inside it. And this young boy is none other than Helge, Peter's father. Now we are in 1986, where Jonas is exploring Winden High School. The first person he meets is the teenage Regina, who tells Jonas that he can find Ines in the hospital. Meanwhile, Egon heads to the power plant to investigate Mads' disappearance. He talks to the middle-aged Helge, and he sort of realizes that Helge is holding on to something, so he writes everything down in his diary. At the same time, or shall I say, in another time, a middle-aged Charlotte gets the search warrant for the power plant in 2019. Middle-aged Ulrich, on the other hand, finds Egon's diary and reads the part about Helge, and it's all coming together. In 1986, Jonas is walking down the forest road where Egon spots him. Jonas mentions that he's going to the hospital, so Egon gives him a lift. Back in 2019, Ulrich calls Charlotte and tells her that Helge was supposed to be interviewed by Egon about Mads 33 years back, but Helge didn't show up for the interview. So Ulrich thinks the old man must be connected to all this. Ulrich then meets with Helge and questions him about Mikkel and Mads. Helge just blabbers about something and stopping someone, but doesn't really answer Ulrich's question. So Ulrich gets furious. I mean, who wouldn't lose their minds at this point? Anyway, Ulrich starts assaulting Helge into getting an answer, but the hospital staff arrives and drags Ulrich out. Next, we're back in 1986, where Jonas Jonas sees Mikkel hanging out with a middle-aged Enos. The stranger also arrives on the scene and tells Jonas that Mikkel is actually his father. Talk about an unceremonious announcement. This means that Ulrich is his grandfather and Martha is his aunt. Man, that's enough to really make me feel sick. Jonas feels the same, so he wants to take Mikkel back to 2019. You clearly haven't watched enough time travel movies, Jonas. Maybe watch Dark on Netflix and you'll learn something. Moving on, the stranger tells Jonas that by taking Mikkel back to 2019, he will prevent Mikkel from becoming his father, which means Jonas will cease to exist. See, it's really not that simple. Obviously, nobody wants that, so Jonas doesn't reach out to Mikkel. Meanwhile, teenage Katharina gets a teenage Ulrich out of jail by confirming that he didn't force himself on her. In 2019, middle-aged Ulrich tells Katharina that he's suspended for basically assaulting Helga, but Katharina isn't interested in all of that. Instead, she confronts Ulrich for cheating on her with Hannah. Finally, kick his ass! No? Really? You're not gonna? Alright. Katharina obviously wants to say much more to Ulrich, but she doesn't. She knows that the guilt itself will tear Ulrich apart. Well, I guess that's even better than a kick in the ass. The next day, Ulrich visits his mother to ask more about the night Mads went missing. He doesn't really tell Jana the dead body that they found in the forest is Mads, but he's hoping that she remembers something that can help him solve this puzzle. Well, he was right, because Jana remembers that 33 years ago, around the same time Mads disappeared, she saw a priest arguing with a man. This man has strange scars on his face, and Jana says that she saw the man in Winden today, in 2019. And that's kind of strange. And wait, we do know somebody who has scars on his face. Is Jana really talking about Helga? Holy crap, she might be. Ulrich was right to suspect him, because in the very next moment, we see that the man Jana is talking about is indeed Helga, but his middle-aged version from 1986. What did you do, Helga? What did you do? Meanwhile, Ulrich's stunt with Helga makes Charlotte suspicious of her father-in-law, so she visits Helga's cabin and goes into the bunker. There, she finds a piece of wallpaper, and no, this piece doesn't come from some random wallpaper. It's from the same wallpaper that was in the torture room. So does this mean that Helga has been torturing and killing the kids in the torture room? Damn, I actually really hope that that's not true. At the same time, Jonas uses the crossing to return to 2019. Next, old Helga runs off from the hospital towards the cave, and Ulrich follows him, but before leaving the hospital, Ulrich also picks a book from Helga's room. This book discusses time, and it's written by H.G. Tannhaus. Ulrich also sends a voice note to Charlotte while following Helga. Elsewhere, middle-aged Helga from 1986 carries the body of Jessen out of the bunker, and inside the bunker, there's Noah cleaning the blood. Gosh, another kid? Really? I was not ready for this. Like, don't do this. Moving on, we see a date written on the wall in the bunker confirming that it's 1953. So yeah, we've got 3 timelines now. 2019, 1986, and 1953. All 33 years apart. This also confirms that Helga can time travel, and he kidnapped Jessen and Mads. Episode 8 begins in 1953 when Helga is still a child. We also see the middle-aged version of Egon, who comes across 2 children near the site where the nuclear plant is about to open. Now we jump to the stranger and H.G. Tannhaus's conversation that is happening in 1986, where they discuss that a wormhole connects not 2, but 3 dimensions. Yeah, we get it now. And at the same time, in 2019, middle-aged Ulrich keeps following old Helga inside the cave and finds 2 passages, and goes through the left one, back to 1953, where we meet Helga's strict mother, Greta, who, let's just say, isn't very keen on showing love to her child. Bound, Helga's father, who is in his mid-40s at this time, also arrives. Young Helga then tells his father that the police found 2 children on the construction site. Next, we see Ulrich getting out of the caves, and he's now in 1953. You're in the wrong timeline, my friend. Mikkel is in 1986. Around the same time, young Helga is hanging out in the bunker near his father's cabin. Suddenly, 2 teenagers arrive near the cabin and bully young Helga, who isn't able to fight back. And at this time, middle-aged Ulrich spots young Helga, and the bullies run away from the scene. At this moment, Ulrich doesn't realize he's traveled back in time, and that the kid in front of him is Helga's child self. So he advises young Helga to fight back the next time and leaves the scene to chase old Helga. Moving on, Ulrich gets onto the road, and a car stops by him. A middle-aged woman steps out of the car to confirm the address and says that her name is Agnes. Agnes also asks her son to come out of the car and calls him by the name Tronte. Damn! Poor Ulrich just met his grandmother mother and his father's younger self. All of this is happening while the stranger is in 1986, still talking with old H.G. Tannhaus at the time. About time, about wormholes, and of course about time travel. Back in 1953, middle-aged Ulrich realizes that something's wrong. Like, really, really wrong. After seeing Agnes and young Tronte. At this point, Ulrich accepts the fact that he's traveled back in time, and he's still holding on to H.G. Tannhaus's book that he picked up from Helga's room in 2019. He says to himself that maybe, just maybe, the guy who wrote about time knows about time travel, so he uses the address in the book to find the 1953 version of H.G. Tannhaus, who is in his middle age around this time. And around the same time, young Helga is studying with young Claudia in her home. We also meet Claudia's mother and Egon's wife Doris. Agnes and young Tronte then arrive there to rent out rooms at Egon's house. Yep, that's when Tronte and Claudia meet for the first time. Back at Tannhaus's store, Ulrich is trying to make sense of everything by talking to the middle-aged Tannhaus. But at this point, even Tannhaus doesn't know if time travel is possible. And before he can answer more questions for Ulrich, young Ines and young Jana arrive at the store to pick something up, and Ulrich sees the child version of his mother. Talk about weird. The girls talk about the two dead bodies the police found at the construction site. Believing that it could be Mikkel, Ulrich rushes out and forgets his jacket and Tannhaus's book. Now we see young Claudia and young Tronte going for a walk in the woods, and that's when Claudia's dog, Gretchen, runs into the cave. Meanwhile, Ulrich goes to the station and meets a middle-aged Egon, and the police officer confirms that the description of Ulrich's son doesn't match one of the dead boys. Ulrich then asks about Helga, who's still a child, but Ulrich still wants to meet him. After that, middle-aged Egon heads home and meets Agnes and young Tronte, and after talking with Agnes for a bit, Egon goes out to meet Bernd to mention that a strange man was asking about his son. That's right, he's suspicious of Ulrich, which honestly he should be. A little while later, middle-aged Ulrich meets young Helga and confirms whether he's really Helga. Ulrich doesn't want to harm young Helga at first, but he knows that this child will kidnap and kill someone in the future, so he attacks the boy. Young Helga tries to run away, but Ulrich catches him and beats him with a rock. Ulrich thinks Helga is dead, so he hides the body in the basement near the cabin. You are one sick bastard, Ulrich. Moving on, we go back to the stranger and old Tannhaus conversation. The stranger reveals that the event at the nuclear power plant opened a wormhole that can send anyone 33 years into the past and 33 years into the future. The stranger then takes out the device Tannhaus built, which he wants to use to close the wormhole. It's broken, but Tannhaus refuses to fix it because he's scared of what the device can do. The stranger still leaves the device with him in the store in case old Tannhaus changes his mind. We cut back to 1953, where middle-aged Tannhaus finds Ulrich's phone in his jacket, and the book that has his name written on it. Tannhaus tries to use the phone, but quickly realizes that the gadget isn't from his time. And that's not all. He also sees a picture of his old self on the book's cover. Tannhaus then realizes that Ulrich is from the future, and that's Tannhaus himself on the book's cover, which means he'll write it sometime in the future. Man, it just feels weird saying all of it. The 9th episode begins in 1953 with Greta and Bernd worried about the young Helga, so Bernd reached out to the middle-aged Egon so the police can find his boy. Egon believes that Ulrich is behind Helga's disappearance because he was walking around asking about the kid. You know, that's pretty spot on, Egon. So Egon goes out to find the middle-aged Ulrich, and there he is, walking on the road, also bruised up after trying to kill a kid. Egon catches Ulrich before he can escape, and the stupid asshole even confesses to killing young Helga, as if he did God's work. But guess what, you stupid idiot? Young Helga is still alive. Now we go back to 1986, where we see a young boy running from someone in the forest. Meanwhile, middle-aged Claudia returns to the cave and sees some of the nuclear waste, or whatever the hell that is. But then she sees Gretchen running towards her. Yep. The 1953 version of Claudia lost this dog, and the 1986 version of her found it. Meanwhile, teenage Ulrich is out of jail and is hanging out with a teenage Katharina. They see teenage Regina walking by, and since the sly teenage Hannah has already told Katharina that it was Regina who got Ulrich arrested, Katharina starts beating Regina. But then the boy who was running away in the forest arrives at the scene, and he sees poor Regina getting beat up. So the boy pulls out a gun on Ulrich and Katharina. He also makes Ulrich and Katharina apologize to Regina. He's too soft as a criminal. Anywho, this boy is injured, so Regina decides to take him home and patch him up. Oh, also, at this point, the guy reveals that his name is Alexander. That's right, the father of Bartosz and the future director of the Winden nuclear power plant. Next, middle-aged Claudia learns from Bernd learned that some radioactive material leaked from the plant last summer, but they contained the situation. Since then, they've hidden this dangerous material in the caves. Only Helga and a few of the other supervisors know about this incident. In the next moment, we see Helga from 1986 working in the bunker, and old Helga, who's in the same timeline, is watching him. Old Egon also arrives in the cabin to question Helga, but he doesn't open the door. Moving on, Alexander, whose real name is Boris, hides his fake passport in the forest, and teenage Hannah watches him from a distance. Man, this girl just seems to be everywhere. But teenage Alexander is ready to start his new life in Winden, and he asks Claudia to give him a job at the plant. Now we are back in the bunker, where Noah and the middle-aged Helga are fixing the chair. And as it turns out, Noah wants to create a time machine through these experiments. Good luck with that, man. Moving on to 2019, Katharina goes to Hannah's house and asks her about Ulrich. She also confronts Hannah about the affair, and, well, Hannah lies that Ulrich wanted to continue the affair, and he was even ready to divorce Katharina. Hannah says that it was she who ended the affair with Ulrich because she didn't want Ulrich to leave his family. Damn, what did Mikkel see in this woman? Next, we see an old Claudia. Yeah, she is indeed alive in 2019. Meeting Bartosz. Old Claudia tells Bartosz that she's Regina's mother and his grandmother. Bartosz asks Claudia about where she was all these years, and he always thought that Claudia had died. Claudia says she was away for some important work, but she's back now. Claudia then asks about Regina, but Regina wasn't home at the time, so she leaves. At the plant, middle-aged Hannah pulls out Alexander's fake passport and blackmails him. She wants Ulrich to be destroyed. He's already stuck in jail in 1953. Can you think of anything worse, Hannah? So we go back to 2019, and Martha meets Jonas. Yeah, he has returned to 2019 after realizing he can't bring Mikkel back to this timeline. Martha is pissed that Jonas hasn't been answering her calls, and then she confesses her feelings to Jonas. But Jonas isn't ready to date Martha because, she's his aunt. Jonas doesn't reveal anything about the time travel, of course, but he says that he just can't date Martha. Around the same time, Bartosz meets Noah. Apparently, in their last meeting, Noah told Bartosz about the future events, like old Claudia returning to meet Regina in 2019. And since everything happened as Noah predicted, Bartosz now believes in time travel. Welcome to the club, Bartosz. Moving on, old Claudia visits middle-aged Tanhas in 1953. At this point, Tanhas is already trying to make sense of Ulrich's phone, and then old Claudia gives him the design for the time machine. She simply asks Tanhas to build this thing for her. Yeah, she dropped the time travel bomb on him like it's nothing. The 10th episode begins in 2019 and takes us to the day Mikkel disappeared. Before the entire thing with Mikkel goes down, Peter is hanging out in the bunker near Helga's cabin. Out of nowhere, Mads Nielsen's body drops from a wormhole. Peter is scared, so he calls Trante for help after seeing Mads' name on the boy's ID card. They're both confused as hell, and then old Claudia enters the bunker and asks them to drop Mads' body in the forest. Meanwhile, Jonas asks Ines whether she knew that Michael, or Mikkel, was from the future, and Ines confirms that she knew it all along. After that, we see Bartosz confronting Jonas for kissing his girlfriend. Yeah, Martha told him, and this leads to a fight between the two. So yeah, this friendship is over. Or is it? Now back in 1986, the stranger meets the old H.G. Tannhaus, who is working on two devices. The one the stranger dropped off from the future, and the device that Tannhaus is working on in 1986. Tannhaus has fixed the stranger's device, and the stranger puts the radioactive material into the device to make it functional. And at the same time, old Helga from 2019, who is still strolling around in 1986, meets the middle-aged Helga. Middle-aged Helga is scared as hell, and then old Helga asks him to stop following Noah's orders. But the middle-aged Helga refuses to believe that Noah has been using him, so he runs away. Meanwhile, in 2019, Jonas is ready to go back into the caves. Jonas has redecided to bring Mikkel back, even if that erases him from existence. Man, that's brave. Jonas is now in 1986, and meanwhile, middle-aged Charlotte continues her investigation of Helga in 2019. And well, she reads the newspaper from 1953, which talked about young Helga's kidnapping. On the clippings, she also sees a picture of Ulrich. That should make your brain itch, Charlotte. Oh, and yes, Jonas goes to meet Mikkel, but before he can talk to the boy, Noah kidnaps Jonas and takes him to the torture room. The stranger visits Jonas in the torture room, but instead of getting him out, he says that Jonas must go through this experience. Why though? But that's not the shocking part. Interestingly, the stranger tells him that he is Jonas, meaning that the stranger is Jonas from the future. Jeez, so you mean Jonas is talking to himself right now? And what does that mean? There's another timeline? Man, it's just making me dizzy. Anywho, the stranger, who we now can say is middle-aged Jonas, says that the torture room is a prototype for a time machine, and what the young Jonas is experiencing right now, the middle-aged Jonas has already experienced. Moving on, old Helga wants to stop his younger self at all costs, so he dives straight into middle-aged Helga's car, hoping to kill him, but guess what? Middle-aged Helga survives, and it's the old Helga who dies in the accident. Oh man, you know, I was kind of rooting for old Helga. Anyway, in 2019, middle-aged Charlotte sees the newspaper clipping about the same accident from 1986. Then she gets a text from Peter, who asks her to meet him at the cabin. Next, Noah talks to Bartosz and tells him about the time machine and everything else. Noah says that the middle-aged Jonas is trying to use the machine built by Tannhaus to destroy the time travel passage inside the caves, but this little stunt by Jonas creates the passage in the first place. You know, it's a paradox. Apparently, old Claudia told middle-aged Jonas that he could destroy the passage by using the device on the exact spot where the passage opens, and that's why Jonas took the device to Tannhaus to get it repaired. But old Claudia lied to him. Everything middle-aged Jonas is trying to do is simply part of an endless time loop. It'll temporarily close the passage inside the caves, but the time loop never ends. Noah says that the middle-aged Jonas is nothing but a pawn for Claudia, and he tells Bartosz that the two forces are trying to control time. While Noah belongs to the light, Claudia and Jonas belong to the shadow. Yeah, right. At the same time, the middle-aged Jonas triggers the machine at the intersection of the wormhole, which connects to 3 timelines. The event covers the entire forest area with a wormhole in 2019. Yeah, that's actually terrifying. Meanwhile, we see young Helga back in 1953, who's locked inside the bunker. And then we cut to young Jonas, who is in 1986, still stuck in the torture room, which is also the bunker. The event also creates a wormhole between the bunkers in 1953 and 1986. Holy crap. That's mind-boggling. That's amazing and terrifying. And anyway, Jonas and young Helga can see each other through the wormhole, and they touch each other's hands. Oh man, is that even safe? Well, honestly, it doesn't really look like it. But this sends young Helga into the bunker in 1986, and young Jonas, well, he arrives in another timeline, possibly into the future. Where? Wait for it. Winden is destroyed. Alright, what the actual is going on here? You know, I need answers. The first episode of the second season takes us to June 21st, 1921. We see 2 men working in the same caves in Winden where the passage opens. They're digging the caves, and when they come out, they start talking about faith and someone called Adam. The older man has lost faith in Adam, so Adam sent the younger man, who by the way is Noah, to kill the older guy. Now we see young Jonas waking up in the future timeline, with the exact date being June 21st, 2053. Jonas now visits the bunker where he hears a tape from Claudia. Apparently, an apocalyptic event happened in Winden in June 27th, 2020, where there were few survivors who are working on correcting what happened in the past. Back to the original timeline, the date is June 21st, 2020, so we're only 6 days away from the apocalypse mentioned in Claudia's tape. Also, it's been months since young Jonas, middle-aged Ulrich, and old Helga disappeared from this timeline. Alright, so a lot has changed in the past few months. Regina is battling cancer, and Clausen, head of the Winden task force, has taken charge to find all the missing people. Magnus and Francesca are still dating, and Katharina has decided to explore the caves herself. Yeah, she's had enough. Speaking of being tired, Martha breaks up with Bartosz because she feels the guy has been hiding something, and he sure is. Moving on, Hannah has lost her husband, and her son is now missing, so she's ready to kill herself, but right then, a middle-aged Jonas enters the room. Hannah is clearly confused seeing this strange man enter her house. But then, the middle-aged Jonas tells Hannah that he is Jonas from the future. What? Since Hannah was busy ruining everyone's lives while Jonas was dealing with the time-traveling crap, she refuses to believe middle-aged Jonas at first. But then Jonas tells her some of his childhood stories, and the bulb in Hannah's head lights up. She realizes that this man actually is Jonas. That's right, Hannah. It's about time you pay attention to what's happening around you. Now, we're back to 2053, where Jonas sees a group of people led by a deaf woman. Yep, we all know this deaf woman is Elisabeth. Man, it looks like the little girl we knew went through hell hell? Anyway, Elizabeth and her group have marked the nuclear plant area as the dead zone, since that was the epicenter for the apocalypse. Elizabeth has only one rule: never, ever go to the dead zone. But some people break the rules because they're stubborn, so we see Elizabeth kill some men for entering the dead zone. Elizabeth also believes that one day a passage will open that'll take the survivors to paradise, and they've been waiting for this passage to open soon. Back in 2020, Peter and young Elizabeth go through the stuff in Tannhaus's clock shop. Apparently, after Charlotte's parents died, Tannhaus was the one who raised her. Elizabeth also sees a picture of a young Charlotte and Tannhaus. Meanwhile, Katharina continues to search the caves, and Martha goes into her mother's room and sees everything Katharina has been doing. And now, in 1921, we finally meet Adam. That's right, it's him. It looks like this man is in his 80s. He seems like a well-mannered man who messed up his skin by doing God knows what. And yeah, for some reason, he's the one who has been leading Noah and maybe every other asshole in the series. Adam says to Noah that the apocalypse must not be stopped, and they have been using Bartosz for the same purpose. What's your end game, Adam? Why do you want the apocalypse to happen? Back in 2020, the middle-aged Jonas tells Hannah everything, including the fact that young Jonas is stuck in the future because the middle-aged Jonas closed the passage. Yep, we all remember you doing that. Meanwhile, young Elizabeth and Peter are still going through the stuff at Tannhaus's store. Surprisingly, Elizabeth spots Noah in an old photograph, and she tells Peter it's the same man who gave her the pocket watch. Cut to Martha, and she fills in Magnus on everything she found while inside Katharina's room. At the same time, Noah takes Bartosz into the caves. Things move forward as Peter shows Noah's photograph to Charlotte, and back at the power plant, Alexander pours concrete over the remaining boxes of the nuclear waste. Finally, in 2053, young Jonas enters the power plant and sees the God particle, in the exact spot where Alexander buried the nuclear waste in 2020. The God particle seems like a huge ball of black fluid and is no random fluid. It is the fluid that was buried by Alexander in 2020. For him, it was nothing but nuclear waste that he had hidden from the authorities, but the truth is the liquid inside the canisters created the God particle, which is the foundation of time travel. The second episode kicks off with young Jonas using the instructions on Claudia's tape to stabilize the God particle. In the original timeline, or should I say in 2020, the middle-aged Jonas shows Hannah the time machine and tells her to see for herself what this thing can do. Meanwhile, in 1987, the old Claudia meets with young Claudia at the power plant and tells her everything. Back in 2020, Clausen and Charlotte talk to Regina because she was the last person to see Ulrich. Regina was telling them that Ulrich was asking about Mads. Then, Regina also gives them the stuff middle-aged Jonas left at the hotel. It has everything about black holes and the newspaper clipping about Mikkel. Oh, also, you should know that after the accident in the last season, middle-aged Helge lost his mind in 1987. He's now in the hospital, and we know that he'll stay there until the very end. Old Egon tries to question him about Mads, but Helge only keeps repeating the same stuff about the past, present, and future. In the caves, old Claudia shows her younger self how the time machine works, and she also tells her to stop Adam. Old Claudia tells young Claudia everything about the nuclear waste barrels, the 33-year time loop cycle, and she also gives young Claudia a map. After that, old Claudia uses the time machine to just vanish. Cut to 2053. Middle-aged Elizabeth's group catches young Jonas sneaking into the dead zone, so they're all ready to hang him to death. But Elizabeth shoots the rope before Jonas can die because she just can't kill the boy she has known since her childhood. That's a good call, Elizabeth. You can't kill him, because he's the protagonist. He's got plot armor. Back in 1987, old Egon is still beating himself over Mads' disappearance. He's just trying to unravel this mystery, and then Egon remembers the man he arrested for Helga's murder 33 years ago. That's right, friends. He's thinking about Ulrich. Apparently, after getting arrested back in 1953, Ulrich was sent to the psych ward because he just wasn't making any sense with all the time travel crap. Of course, Egon still doesn't know that this man is Ulrich, but still, Egon has an intuition that Ulrich knows something that can help Egon in Mads' case. And finally, Egon meets Ulrich. Yep, there he is. Our Ulrich, flexing his long, gray hair. Jumping back forward to 2053, middle-aged Elizabeth locks young Jonas in a cage so he can't go back to the dead zone. But then a young girl from Elizabeth's group releases him. Why? Well, this unknown girl is just curious about the dead zone and wants to see for herself why exactly Elizabeth is so scared of the place. So young Jonas takes the girl to the dead zone to make her see the God particle, and she's just shocked to see a black ball of fluid floating in the air. Meanwhile, the middle-aged Jonas takes Hannah to see Mikkel in 1987. Hannah sees Mikkel hanging out with Ines, and there it is, the realization that Michael was Mikkel. Hannah just breaks down breakdown knowing that she married Ulrich's son. Yeah, it can be a lot to process. Around the same time, we see that old Claudia has arrived back in 1954, and she buries her time machine in the ground. Fast forward to 1987, we find young Claudia using the mark on old Claudia's map to dig out the same time machine from the same gosh darn spot where old Claudia buried it in 1954. Get it? Time travel. Next, we cut to 2053, where that unknown girl is still shocked as hell to see the God particle, but Jonas acts brave and enters the God particle, while the young girl stays behind. The third episode begins with the middle-aged Noah putting the young Helga on the torture chair. Oh boy. Then the episode cuts to 1954, where we see that Egon's wife Doris is having an affair with Agnes, and well, young Claudia walks into the room and sees everything. On the same day, young Helga returns to his time and reunites with his mother. Yep, I guess Noah sent the child back to his time. Middle-aged Egon also gets the news about young Helga's return. Egon doesn't waste any time and meets young Helga in 1954. Egon tries to get some answers from young Helga about where he was, but Helga doesn't say anything. Meanwhile, 1987, middle-aged Claudia is trying to digest the fact that time travel is frickin' real, but then she remembers that middle-aged Helga once gave her H.G. Tannhaus's book about time. So Claudia decides to meet middle-aged Helga in the hospital, who, well, tells her everything about time travelers and about Noah. Helga tells middle-aged Claudia that she must never, ever trust Noah. Meanwhile, we see Agnes arriving at the bunker to meet old Claudia. Ooh, so Agnes knows everything about time travel. Interesting. Also, it turns out that Agnes is Noah's sister. Yeah, who would have thought? Anywho, since Agnes is with old Claudia, it means that she is working against her brother Noah, who is working with Adam. Old Claudia tells Agnes that Adam's group, Sic Mundus, is preparing for something. She then gives Agnes a newspaper clipping and asks her to hand it to the teenage Claudia before leaving. Next, we see middle-aged Claudia from 1987 meeting with H.G. Tannhaus in our time and asks about his book about time. Tannhaus is met with an older version of Claudia, so he instantly recognizes her. Around the same time in 1987, we see old Egon meeting up with old Ulrich to ask him how exactly Ulrich knew back in 1953 that Egon would have cancer and that his wife would leave him. Of course, Ulrich doesn't say that he's from the future because saying that out loud would, be pretty crazy. Ulrich doesn't even reveal his name, but still old Egon has a hunch that something is wrong, and he remembers that Ulrich mentioned having a son back in 1953. In that moment, old Egon thinks about Mikkel, the boy who arrived randomly in Winden without any trace of his parents. Old Egon then visits middle-aged Enos and asks to meet Mikkel, who's now officially Michael. This young boy also arrived from nowhere, so Egon wants to learn more about him. He doesn't get to meet Michael, but takes one photograph of the boy. Now we see Agnes meeting with middle-aged Noah in 1954. Agnes tells Noah that she wants to join Adam again, and Agnes also mentions some last pages that Adam is looking for. She tells Noah that old Claudia has these pages. At the same time, old Claudia meets her father, young Egon, at the station. Without revealing too much about her identity, old Claudia apologizes for everything that happened or will happen to Egon. Cut to 1987, old Egon meets middle-aged Claudia in her office at the nuclear plant. Claudia says that she doesn't have the time to talk, but then Egon reveals that he has cancer. Man, that's awful. Egon deserves all the time with Claudia, and fortunately, Claudia thinks the same. So she hugs Egon, and they have an emotional moment. Oh, I've been waiting for this moment for so long. After that, old Egon gets back into the hospital to meet old Ulrich because he can't just give up on Mad's case. Old Egon then shows Mikkel's photograph to Ulrich. Sure, Ulrich has spent 33 years in the psych ward, but he instantly recognizes Mikkel. And knowing that Mikkel is here in 1987 triggers Ulrich in a bad way. Ulrich starts to get physical with old Egon while asking about Mikkel, so the staff just drags Ulrich out of there. This man has to stop assaulting people. In that same timeline, middle-aged Noah meets old Claudia in the forest. Noah tells Claudia that Agnes has betrayed her for Adam, which should surprise old Claudia, but it doesn't. Noah then tells old Claudia that he is here too. Kill her. It's time for you to start running, Claudia. But Claudia says that she knows this will happen. Right here, right now. Claudia says that Noah shooting her in this moment is just a part of the endless time loop. Wait, no, it's no time to be a hero. Claudia, just run away. And then it happens. Noah kills Claudia by shooting her. damn it! The sucker Noah then searches Claudia's pockets and finds the last pages Agnes was talking about. A little bit of context. These last pages are actually from Triquetra notebook, which contains every past and future event. Even though we learn later on who actually wrote this book, it's someone who knows every event from the past and the future. Since there are multiple timelines, there are also multiple versions of this book. Adam is also using the Triquetra notebook and is keen on finding the last pages, which old Claudia tore from the notebook, and middle-aged Noah is holding on to these pages right now. Whew. Anyway, moving on, Noah goes through these pages and is shaken by what's written on them. We don't see what exactly is written on the pages, but Noah mentions Charlotte's name in pure shock. Ooh, more suspense. Gotta love it. At the same time, we see the newspaper clipping Claudia handed over to Agnes. The clipping was about an old woman who was found dead in the forest. That's right, Claudia knew she was going to die at Noah's hands, so maybe it was all part of her plan. While all this happens, the young Claudia travels to 2020 and watches Regina from a distance. Now we cut to Adam's place, where Noah has arrived after killing old Claudia. Adam asks if old Claudia is dead, to which Adam says yes. But then Adam asks if Noah found these last pages. And guess what? Noah lies to Adam and says that he didn't find any pages on Claudia. Wait, hold on. Was there something about Adam on those pages? Just tell us already. The fourth episode kicks off with young Jonas arriving in a field where two men find him. They help the boy and even feed him, but they believe Jonas is a soldier. Then Jonas meets young Agnes, and young Jonas still doesn't know exactly where he has arrived to after entering the God particle in 2053. And then Jonas learns that he has arrived in 1921. Bloody hell, so we've got another damn timeline now? Oh man. Moving on, the episode then takes us back to 2020, where Charlotte is going through Tannhaus's stuff, and she finds the blueprint for the time machine. At the same time, Martha, Magnus, Elizabeth, and Francesca decide to go to the caves to figure out what the hell is going on. Back in 1921, young Jonas wakes up after taking some much-needed sleep and meets the young Noah. Noah doesn't say much, but it seems like he already knows Jonas. That's interesting. Anywho, Jonas thinks that young Noah is some crazy dude, so Jonas doesn't stay for long and leaves the place. Back to 2020, Alexander is being interviewed by Clausen about his full name and why Ulrich was so keen on breaking into the nuclear plant. And at the same time, young Claudia arrives at the plant and learns that instead of Regina, Alexander has taken over the power plant. Around that same time, Hannah brings in Charlotte and tells her about the middle-aged Jonas from the future. Charlotte isn't surprised. Unlike Hannah, she isn't stupid. Charlotte asks a middle-aged Jonas about Noah, and he tells her that Noah is a part of Sic Mundus, which is basically a secret society of time travelers. Charlotte then takes Hannah and middle-aged Jonas to the bunker, where they also see Peter. Charlotte shows them every proof of time travel, including the 1953 clipping about Ulrich. Old Claudia gave Peter her notebook, which mentions every event that'll happen in the future. Peter hands over the same notebook to middle-aged Jonas. Meanwhile, middle-aged Claudia surfs the internet and finds out that her father Egon died on June 26, 1987. Moving on from that, Charlotte takes Katharina into the bunker and tells her everything. Middle-aged Jonas also introduces himself, but Katharina refuses to believe anything at this point. The young Jonas is in the caves in 1921, and at the same time, Martha, Magnus, Elizabeth, and Francesca are exploring the caves in 2020. But before these kids can find the passage, Bartosz returns to his time. Now, Martha and everyone tie up Bartosz and take the briefcase he was carrying. On the other hand, young Jonas finds the Sic Mundus gate inside the cave in 1921, but the passage is closed. Remember, the middle-aged Jonas closed it using the device in the first season. Back to 2020, Katharina still doesn't buy the crap about time travel, but she goes through the school records for 1986 anyway. There she sees Mikkel in one of the school yearbook pictures. Katharina has been looking for Mikkel everywhere, so she completely breaks down after realizing that her son is indeed stuck in the past. She just feels so completely helpless in this moment. In 1921, young Noah arrives near the caves and tells young Jonas that it will take another 32 years before the passage opens again. Young Noah also tells young Jonas that the Sic Mundus people are waiting for him. Young Noah then takes Jonas to meet the middle-aged Noah. Man, this is so weird. Anywho, while young Jonas is completely clueless about what's happening, young Noah asks middle-aged Noah about the Triquetra notebook and who actually wrote it, but middle-aged Noah doesn't have an answer for that. After that, middle-aged Noah takes young Jonas to the Sic Mundus hideout. Oh, and also, while all this is happening, middle-aged Claudia returns to 1987 from 2020. Next, we cut back to 2053, where the girl who helped young Jonas is standing near the God particle. Turns out middle-aged Elizabeth followed them as well. The young girl asks Elizabeth about the God particle, and Elizabeth says that she has always known about its existence, but she hid it from everyone because it's part of the devil. Nah, it isn't. Trust me, it's not. Moving on, young Jonas now finally meets the leader of Sic Mundus, Adam, and it turns out that Adam is none other than the future version of Jonas. Holy damn, we have 3 Jonases now. Why does this have to be so freaking complicated? The 5th episode continues the conversation between Adam and young Jonas. Jonas wants to return to his time and save everyone from the apocalypse, but Adam tells him that this is 1921, so he has exactly 99 years to prevent all of the deaths. That makes sense, but doesn't make sense at the same time. In 1987, old Ulrich escapes from the hospital by stealing a key from the staff, and at the same time, middle-aged Claudia is visiting her father, knowing that he'll die in a few days. Cut to 2020, Katharina asks Hannah if she could take her to 1987, but Hannah says that middle-aged Jonas has left and he has taken the time machine with him. Clausen also arrives at the same time to interview Hannah about the disappearance of Jonas. Clausen then shows the picture of middle-aged Jonas to both Hannah and Katharina, but they lie and say they don't know any man like that. Meanwhile, the middle-aged Jonas breaks into Martha's room and he leaves a pendant for her. A little while later, middle-aged Jonas meets Charlotte in the bunker and he tells Charlotte that it was Noah who killed all those children. He also says that it was Charlotte's adoptive grandfather, Tannhaus, who built the time machine with old Claudia's help. Meanwhile, Martha, Magnus, Francesca, and Elizabeth returned to the caves to talk with Bartosz, who spent the entire night tied up there. Bartosz is scared as hell, so he agrees to tell everything. Well, yeah, one night in the dark cave can break anyone. Sure, Martha and the other kids refuse to believe the time travel crap, so to make them believe he's telling the truth, Bartosz shows them how to use the time machine. We are now back in 1987, where old Ulrich has escaped from the hospital. After roaming around for a bit, he finds Mikkel. Ulrich approaches Mikkel carefully and talks to him. Ulrich doesn't right away reveal his identity to Mikkel, but after a while, Mikkel realizes that this old dude with long gray hair is, in fact, his father. Damn, Ulrich basically went through hell to reunite with Mikkel. I seriously feel bad for him, though. Moving on, in 1921, young Jonas learns from Adam that the true goal of Sic Mundus is to create a world without the boundaries of time. Yep, Adam wants to play God. Next, we cut back to 2021, where middle-aged Noah meets Charlotte in the clock store, and Noah reveals that he is Charlotte's father. Noah also shows a torn picture of himself holding baby Charlotte. Wait, we didn't know about Charlotte's parents until this point. I never thought of that. Anywho, middle-aged Noah reveals that Charlotte was taken from him, and has been searching for her since then. Noah also reveals about the apocalypse, and that he wants to end Adam to make sure everyone lives. Alright, so he plans on betraying Adam. That's quite interesting. At this point, Martha and the gang arrive in 1987, and Bartosz tells them about Noah and Adam, and that they want to control the time. Meanwhile, old Ulrich tries to run away from Mikkel, but the police catch him. Old Egon returns Mikkel to Ines, while the police arrest Ulrich for trying to kidnap a child. Sure, Mikkel can say to the police that Ulrich is his father, but hey, he's just a kid who can't understand what's happening. And seriously, who would believe him anyway? So Mikkel just stays silent when the police drive away with Ulrich. Around the same time, Martha and everyone still can't accept that they've arrived in 1987, but then they see some posters from the 80s, and they also sense that the forest road and the bus stop seem, well, different. And just as they start to believe, while standing on the forest road, the police cars carrying Ulrich pass by them. Ulrich looks out the window and sees Martha and Magnus. Ulrich screams and says that they're his children, but for the police, he's a madman who believes every kid in this town is his child. Man, this guy can't catch a break. Moving on, Mikkel is now back with Ines, and Martha and the other kids have returned to their time. But in her room, Martha finds the coin left by middle-aged Jonas. The middle-aged Jonas also returns home, and he confronts Hannah for having an affair with Ulrich. Hannah has nothing to say, so middle-aged Jonas just goes back to his room after saying that Hannah has messed up really badly. Well, ain't that the truth? Back in 1921, Adam reveals the God particle to young Jonas, and he tells him that young Jonas must find the very beginning of all this. Young Jonas says that everything started the day Michael committed committed suicide. Adam then says maybe, just maybe, by stopping Michael from committing suicide, young Jonas can change everything. So Jonas enters the God particle to stop Michael from hanging himself. But does it really begin with Michael's suicide, or is the beginning something else entirely? Well, that's a really good question. The 6th episode takes us back to June 20th, 2019, a day before Michael committed suicide. We see Jonas all happy, Michael and Hannah being all lovey-dovey, but Michael is scared as hell by the very thought of facing Ulrich and his family, like ever. Well, you can't really judge him for being scared because he knows that in reality, Ulrich and Katharina are his parents, and Mikael is Michael's younger self. We then see Martha, Jonas, and the rest of the teenage gang hang out by the lake, and right then, Jonas and Martha find a pendant in the dirt, the same coin that middle-aged Jonas left in Martha's room. Oh, also, young Jonas, the one from the original timeline, has time traveled to this day. The first people he meets are Ulrich, Katharina, and Mikael. Ulrich offers time traveler Jonas a ride, but Jonas says he prefers walking. Back at the lake, Jonas sits with Martha for a bit, then leaves to deliver some medicine to Ines. Just then, the time traveler Jonas arrives, wearing the same yellow raincoat, and now time traveler Jonas makes the move on Martha, and they both kiss. Wait, so up until this point, Jonas didn't even know that his other version kissed Martha? Okay, that's weird as hell. Later, while everyone else is attending Magnus's birthday party, the time traveler Jonas meets Michael. Jonas tells Michael that he knows everything, and Michael completely breaks down. Man, no matter how many times I watch it, this scene always tears me up. After that, time traveler Jonas asks Michael not to commit suicide because he thinks that this particular event starts the loop. Meanwhile, Martha and the other Jonas make out in Martha's room, so Martha has kissed 2 Jonases in the same day. Moving on, Michael tells the time traveler Jonas that the night he went missing as a kid, it was Jonas who led him into the caves. Apparently, the original Jonas lost Mikael near the caves, but then the time traveler Jonas found Mikael, and he was wearing the same jacket. The time traveler Jonas then took Mikael into the passage and left him in 1986. Time traveler Jonas refuses to believe this, but then Michael says that maybe Jonas hasn't traveled to this day to stop Michael. Gosh, I don't really like where this is going. Instead, the true purpose of Jonas to time travel to this day is to ensure that Michael commits suicide. Damn, that's just heartbreaking. And that's not it, because a couple of months later, after Michael dies, the time traveler Jonas has to lead Mikael into the caves and the tunnel. It's just like an endless cycle of torture for Jonas. Anywho, while Jonas and Michael are talking, old Claudia arrives on the scene. Wait, isn't she dead? Alright, yeah, time travel. Multiple timelines, no one's truly dead in the show. Moving on, you got it, moving on. Old Claudia says that Adam sent Jonas to this day, not to stop Michael, but to ensure that everything happens as it always has. Claudia then says that Jonas has to fight Adam to save the world. Claudia also says that she has seen the timeline where Jonas doesn't exist, and it's a hellhole, so Michael has to die, and Mikael has to disappear to make sure Jonas doesn't get erased from existence. While all this heavy stuff is happening at home, Hannah is kissing Ulrich, and the other Jonas is getting laid. Michael writes the letter and hangs himself as he was supposed to, and finally we see Adam in 1921 and the future versions of Magnus and Francesca. Wait, so Magnus and Francesca are also working for Adam? Seems like this is going to be really rough for time traveler Jonas. The 7th episode kicks off in 1954, and middle-aged Egon can be seen examining the dead body of old Claudia. Egon met her at the police station before, so obviously he is disturbed. Next in 2020, we see Hannah entering the caves after stealing the time machine from Jonas. Yeah, this woman can betray anyone. Meanwhile, Charlotte tells Peter that she met middle-aged Noah, and Noah mentions some apocalypse. At the same time, Clausen is still trying to solve several mysteries at once. And then he finds out that Alexander is actually someone else, and he's hiding his true identity. Now we cut to Martha and the gang. While everyone agrees that they should tell anyone about the time travel bit, Martha is hell-bent on finding Jonas, especially after she finds that pendant in her room. In 1954, middle-aged Egon meets with young Helga and shows the boy a picture of Claudia. Helga calls her the White Devil and says that she wants to kill everyone. Okay, this child is clearly brainwashed by Noah. In 2020, Clausen asks Alexander about his true identity, then arrests him for identity theft. Oh, come on. Hannah gets to walk free while this guy gets arrested? Yeah, that's not fair. On that same day, Martha arrives at Hannah's home to meet her, and since she's not home, middle-aged Jonas answers the door. And as expected, she quickly finds out that the bearded man standing in front of her is Jonas. Oh, and you should know that Hannah has Agnes traveled to 1954 where she meets middle-aged Egon and asks about Ulrich, saying the man is her husband. Talk about obsessed. Meanwhile, Katharina storms into Hannah's home and sees middle-aged Jonas talking to Martha. Katharina is furious, so she tells Martha everything about Michael, and the fact that Martha is Jonas's aunt. Martha feels like a bomb just dropped on her, and Katharina asks middle-aged Jonas if he still has the time machine. Katharina says he must travel to 1987, since that's where Michael is stuck, but Jonas says that Hannah took the machine with her. Martha then says to Katharina that Magnus has a time machine, so they can use it to bring Michael back. At this point, we also learn that the real Alexander was Clausen's brother. Apparently, the real Alexander disappeared back in 1986, and Boris stole Alexander's identity. Damn, that's some crazy coincidence there. Anyway, Clausen has been searching for his brother ever since. And then one day, Clausen received an anonymous letter stating that he could find answers about his brother in Winden. That's why Clausen arrived in Winden, and he was also keen on learning more about Alexander. Okay, so this no longer feels like a coincidence. Cutting to 1987, old Egon tells middle-aged Claudia that he believes in time travel. He believes the man who tried to kill young Helga was from the future, and the boy with Enos is from the future as well. Claudia already knows this, but she's scared about her dad, who will die soon. And at the same time, Magnus and the kids tell Peter and Charlotte about the time travel. But the kids are surprised to find out that Peter and Charlotte already are aware of everything. That's right, these two are way ahead of you kids. Hannah now meets middle-aged Ulrich in 1954, and instead of getting him out, she leaves him there. That's her revenge because Ulrich didn't love her. Gosh, and just when I thought I couldn't hate this woman more. Next, we cut to old Egon's room in 1987, where Egon realizes that middle-aged Claudia knows about the time travel, and the nuclear plant and the caves that are connected to it. In fact, Claudia is trying to hide it all to save her ass. Egon then tries to call the police so they can search the caves, but middle-aged Claudia thinks that'll put the plant in danger. She tries to snatch the phone, and right then, Egon falls on the ground, hits his head, and starts bleeding. And instead of calling an ambulance, Claudia leaves her father to die. Claudia knew that her father would die on this very day in his apartment. She read about it on the internet in 2020. Claudia realizes that everything happened exactly as it should have, and that if she tries to change the past, she would put Regina in danger. To wrap up the episode, we leave Alexander in jail, Egon dead, and Hannah flirting with a young Egon. The time traveler Jonas also returns, and he asks middle-aged Claudia to come with him to the future. Those were the instructions from the old Claudia to Jonas. As promised, the 8th episode takes us to the future, in 2053, where we see Elizabeth. What's shocking about this part is that Elizabeth pulls out the same picture that Noah showed to Charlotte, but this is the complete picture, which has middle-aged Elizabeth and middle-aged Noah holding baby Charlotte in their arms. Oh, jeez, can this be any more up? I mean, it means that Elizabeth married Noah in the future, and their child is Charlotte. So, Charlotte's daughter is her mother, but somehow Charlotte was taken away from Noah and Elizabeth, and she was left in the past timeline. Charlotte then grows up under Tannhaus's care, and she marries Peter, and they have Elizabeth. Man, this is just making me sick. Now we have a young Jonas in the caves with middle-aged Claudia in 1987. This time, young Jonas is determined to break the cycle with the help of middle-aged Claudia. Meanwhile, the middle-aged Jonas is in 2020, where he meets Martha at her home. He knows that the apocalypse will destroy everything in a few hours, so he wants to save Martha. At the same time, Clausen gets the warrant to search the nuclear plant in the caves, so yeah, he's officially making a move against Alexander. The apocalypse will happen in 6 hours, so Jonas forces Martha to come with him by threatening her with a gun. You know, that's not how you save someone, Jonas. Anywho, back in 1987, young Jonas tells middle-aged Claudia that he must open the passage again to stop Adam, and the middle-aged Jonas takes Martha inside the bunker and locks her there. He knows that's the only place in Winden that'll be safe once the apocalypse happens. Middle-aged Jonas then leaves the bunker and meets Katharina. He tries to convince Katharina that she can't bring Michael back to 2020 because it'll mess up the timelines, but Katharina wants to bring back her child no matter what. While all this is happening, middle-aged Noah confronts Adam about the last pages from the Triquetra notebook. Apparently, those last pages had information about Charlotte, about where she was taken, but guess what? Adam has always known about Charlotte, but he kept this hidden from Noah. But middle-aged Noah finally learns the truth by reading those pages. Noah then reveals the last pages he found in Claudia's pocket and says that Adam lied to him about Charlotte. He tries to kill Adam, but his gun doesn't work. Then Agnes arrives on the scene and kills middle-aged Noah using the same gun. It was his destiny to die this way. Whew. A lot has been happening all at once. I seriously need a break. Young Jonas now reopens the passage in 1987, and during all the chaos, Peter arrives at the bunker with young Elizabeth in 2020, allowing Martha to escape. Young Jonas and middle-aged Claudia also arrive in 2020 using the time machine. As soon as they arrive in 2020, young Jonas heads out to find Hannah and Martha, and he asks middle-aged Claudia to take the time machine back to the bunker. Now we see that Clausen has found the spot where Alexander covered the radioactive waste with concrete. He wants to break the concrete to see what's under it. You know, man, you don't do that. You shouldn't do that. During all of this, middle-aged Claudia meets Regina to apologize and to take her to the bunker. Also, young Noah, the one who still is alive, meets middle-aged Jonas in 2020. Noah says that middle-aged Jonas must save Noah, Agnes, Bartosz, Magnus, and Francesca. Why? Well, according to young Noah, by saving these people, Jonas can ensure that Martha lives. Now we see Katharina entering the cave since she knows the passage is opened. And back in 1921, Adam gets into the God particle. Middle-aged Claudia now brings Regina into the bunker as well. The young Jonas meets Martha and they have a brief romantic moment, but it's cut short when Adam arrives. Adam tells young Jonas that he must do something so that young Jonas can become Adam in the future, and just like that, the old asshole shoots Martha so Jonas can experience pain, and that pain can lead young Jonas to become Adam. Dude, that's evil. Hasn't young Jonas experienced enough pain already? Now while Martha bleeds out on the floor, Clausen destroys the concrete that's covering the nuclear waste at the plant. The middle-aged Jonas now arrives with the time machine to save Magnus, Bartosz, and Francesca. He doesn't take them to the bunker because there isn't much time left. Instead, the middle-aged Jonas wants to take the kids to another timeline using the time machine. At the same time, Charlotte arrives at the nuclear plant because she knows that Clausen will open up the canisters that'll trigger the apocalypse. But sadly, it's too late to stop anyone because Clausen opens up one of the canisters, and the radioactive material becomes the God particle in the nuclear plant. Young Noah also arrives at the bunker at this point, so I guess he will also survive the apocalypse. Meanwhile, the God particle in the plant creates a wormhole between 2053 and 2020. This wormhole lets Charlotte from the 2020 see Elizabeth from 2053. Gosh, that's not good at all. But that's not the worst part, as a black hole starts to cover the sky in 2020. At this point, Martha has died in her home, and young Jonas doesn't even think of saving himself from the apocalypse. And honestly, we understand Jonas. It's too much to handle, but right then, another version of Martha arrives to save Jonas. Okay, what the is happening right now? I mean, now there are two young Marthas? Oh, sorry, I almost lost my cool there. Like honestly, what the Moving on, the new Martha then takes out a completely new device to teleport Jonas and herself somewhere else. Martha also confirms that she isn't from another timeline, she is from another world. Man, that is just crazy. The first episode of the third season kicks off with a man arriving at Adam's hideout. Then, the younger and older version of the same man arrives there, and they burn everything in the room. Okay, so we have another villain now. The episode then takes us to where the second season left off. New Martha, or the time traveler Martha, teleports herself and young Jonas to her world. We'll call it the alternate world. Time traveler Martha tells Jonas that her world is tied to this world by some kind of knot, but Martha promises to fix everything and then just leaves using the same device. And there is young Jonas standing completely clueless about what is going on. But one thing is clear, young Jonas hasn't arrived in a different time. In fact, he's arrived on a different world. Alright, so now we're in the alternate world. The date is November 4th, 2019, and Martha from the alternate world wakes up in her home. And no, this isn't the time traveler Martha who met young Jonas. This Martha still hasn't come across the concept of time travel, so we'll just call her Clueless Martha. Moving on, there are alternate versions of everyone in this world. There's Katharina, Mikkel, and Magnus, who's already having a really good morning with Francesca, but they all look slightly different. And yes, in this world, Katharina and Ulrich are divorced. And Ulrich, well, he's with Hannah, who's pregnant with their child. Yes, things are very different. Eric has disappeared in this world as well. Oh, and we also meet Bartosz, who seems like a nerd in this world. Also, Clueless Martha is dating a guy named Kilian, who is Eric's brother. Peter, Charlotte, and Helga are also here, and Helga is sick, as we saw in the main world. Meaning, young Jonas finds what's supposed to be his house, but Martha and her family are living there. That's weird. Anyway, young Jonas looks around the house, and he realizes that in this world, Jonas doesn't even exist. And even if there is is an alternate version of Jonas in this world, he still isn't a part of Martha's life. Next, we see that Ulrich is cheating on Hannah, so yeah, the tables have turned. Moving on, young Jonas arrives in Martha's class at Winden High School, and nobody, I mean nobody, knows him. Okay, so this might actually be a world without Jonas. Interesting. Meanwhile, Alexander is leading the power plant, so Charlotte asks him to search the plant to see if they can find something about Eric. Back at the school, young Jonas tries to talk to clueless Martha, but this version of her doesn't recognize him. On his way back, Jonas also sees Hannah, who doesn't know him either. Later, we see Ulrich at the police station, and it turns out that he's cheating on Hannah with Charlotte. He's a sick bastard, no matter the world. On the same day, we see Magnus and Francesca meeting up in the bunker, and guess what? Elisabeth is deaf in the main world, but in the alternate world, it's Francesca who is deaf. On the other hand, Elisabeth can speak in this world. Meanwhile, we learn that Regina is dead in this world, and then young Jonas meets Peter, who, by the way, is a priest, at Regina's grave. Young Jonas learns from Peter that there's no Michael here as well because, you know, Hannah is married to Ulrich. Next, we move back to the original world, which we'll call Adam's world. The three men, technically two men and one kid, from the opening sequence arrive at Bounce's house in September 21st, 1987, and they kill him after asking for the nuclear plant's master key. On the same night, Alexander visits Jürgen, Eric and Kilian's father, who is a junkie in this world as well. Alexander pays Jürgen to do something before the police arrive at the plant. Later, clueless Martha is waiting for her friends in the forest, and young Jonas tries talking to her. It's clear that Martha is getting deja vu every time she sees Jonas, but then Magnus, Francesca, Bartosz, and Kilian arrive there. But without Mikkel, which surprises Jonas. But the guys tell Jonas to buzz off. Since Mikkel is supposed to disappear on this day, young Jonas goes to Mikkel's house to check if the boy is safe. Well, he is. Now, the lights start to flicker, and clueless Martha and her friends run away from the caves and hide inside the bunker. And that's when the wormhole appears inside the bunker, dropping the dead body of Mads Nielsen. Oh, just like how Mads' body dropped inside the bunker in Adam's world, but in Adam's world, Peter and Tronte find the body. Meanwhile, Jonas is outside Mikkel's house, and he just can't understand what he's supposed to do in this world. And then an old Martha, who goes by the name Eva, meets with Jonas and tells him that this world is without Jonas. And still, it is bound to be destroyed. This guy just can't catch a break. Back in Adam's world, the time traveler, Martha, from the alternate world, meets with middle-aged Jonas, who traveled to 1888 using the time machine before the apocalypse in the second season. Yep, she has two Jonases from Adam's world now. The second episode begins with the time traveler Martha meeting with Magnus, Bartosz, and Francesca from Adam's world. The time traveler Martha says, just like how Martha dies in Adam's world, Magnus and everyone else must die in the alternate world. So time traveler Martha wants to save everyone in the alternate world. Next, we're back in Adam's world where we see that Katharina has time traveled to 1987. Yeah, remember she was in the caves in the final episode of the second season? Well, she finds the passage and uses the time machine to arrive in 1987, but sadly she hasn't found Mikkel. For some reason, both Ines and Michael are missing in 1987. Strange. Of course, Katharina hasn't given up, and she has been doing everything to find Mikkel. In fact, she is secretly living in Ines and Michael's home, waiting for them to return home. We are still in 1987, where we learn that middle-aged Claudia hasn't returned to her time yet, and middle-aged Tronte is trying to find her. Speaking of middle-aged Claudia, she's actually in 2020, where everything is destroyed after the apocalypse. Claudia is there with Regina, who is still dying of cancer. Peter and young Elisabeth also survived the doomsday, and they have been trying to find Charlotte. Oh, what happened to Charlotte? Wasn't she at the nuclear plant when the apocalypse happened? Wow, I hope she's alive. Cut to 1888. Martha tells middle-aged Jonas and the rest of the group everything, but she lies about how she found them and what device she used to travel to the parallel world. And then they meet Gustav Tannhaus, the person who allowed Jonas and his group to stay at his place. Gustav is an old blind man, but he is loaded with money. Overall, he seems like a good man, and yeah, he knows the middle-aged Jonas and everyone who arrived with him are time travelers. Back in 1987, Katharina tries to learn everything about Michael Michael's whereabouts, and she meets a young version of herself and Ulrich at the high school. She also learns that a person recently tried escaping from the asylum, and the person might be the one who took Michael. But Katharina later learns that the Child Protective Services know where Ines and Michael are, and the lunatic Hannah was talking about might be Ulrich. That's right, it's about time that these two reunite. Moving on, Peter and young Elisabeth are trying to survive in 2020, and young Noah is following them. He tries talking to Elisabeth and tells Peter that he will take care of her after Peter is killed. Damn, now I'm kind of scared for Peter. Next, we move back to 1987, and it finally happens. Katharina finally meets with Ulrich in the psych ward, and she promises to get him out of this hellhole. That's right, you go save him, Katharina. Meanwhile, the creepy, unknown guys get inside the nuclear plant, and they kill Yasmin, who worked as Claudia's secretary. Back in 2020, old Tronte arrives to see Regina, and he kills her, saying it's the only way to save her. Stupid old man, what are you up to? Next, we see Charlotte in 2053. That's right, she might have traveled in this timeline when that wormhole appeared before the apocalypse. Back in 1888, Bartosz takes the time traveler Martha to the secret hideout of Sic Mundus. Bartosz reveals that the secret society of time travelers exists in 1888, but Gustav is the only living member of the Sic Mundus during this time. Bartosz now asks time traveler Martha about Adam and if Adam has actually sent her to this world. Martha says no, and she also tells Bartosz that Adam is none other than Jonas. Yeah, he didn't know that up until this point. Now we cut back to the alternate world where Eva tells Jonas that everyone in the alternate world will also die, and this will happen in 3 days. The third episode picks up in 1888 where Gustav is traveling to the town, but his trip is cut short when an unknown man arrives to kill him. These unknown men are on some sort of serious kill streak. We now move to the alternate world where Ulrich reveals that clueless Martha and her friends found a body in the bunker, and the boy is in fact Mads Nielsen. It's like watching the same story but from a different angle. Oh, also Ulrich breaks up with Charlotte. Wise decision, given, what's happening around them. Back in Adam's world, Bartosz reveals to everyone that Jonas is Adam, so basically it was Jonas himself who killed Martha. Meanwhile, in the alternate world, Eva tells young Jonas that he must ensure her younger self takes the same path she did. She also says that Martha and Jonas can never be together. Next, we see Ulrich meeting with his kids to ask what happened in the bunker, and at the same time, Hannah finds out that Ulrich has been sleeping with Charlotte. Moving on, Eva tells Jonas that he must let go of his past to end all of this, and the Martha from her world, her young self, must do the same. Back in Adam's world, the time traveler Martha shows middle-aged Jonas the device she uses to travel between two worlds. She also gives Jonas the material he needs to complete the time machine he's building in 1888. A few moments later, the three unknown killers meet Eva. Yeah, they are working for her. At this point, Eva reveals that she is only working to preserve the knot between the two worlds. However, Adam is being an asshole because he wants to sever this knot by destroying the origin of all of this. Apparently, if Adam actually severs the knot, it'll destroy both his and Eva's world. Clearly, Eva doesn't want that. Eva also says that to preserve this knot and save her world, it is crucial for Martha from Adam's world to perish. Selfish woman. Later that night, clueless Martha wonders if they actually saw a wormhole in the bunker the night they found Mads. The wormhole part feels unreal, so clueless Martha thinks that Kilian must have drugged them on that night, and that the wormhole bit was just the side effects of the drug. Clueless Martha then meets Kilian and asks if he actually drugged them. Well, he didn't, and that's enough for the guy to break up with her. Back at the plant, Hannah blackmails Alexander with the original passport and asks him to destroy Charlotte. Damn it, can this woman just stop ruining people's lives? Charlotte isn't having a great time already, since her father-in-law Helga confesses to killing Mads. It doesn't make any sense to anybody right now, but it will. Meanwhile, young Jonas meets clueless Martha in the forest and convinces her that he's from another world and that he met Martha's future self. Clueless Martha also feels deja vu every damn time she sees young Jonas, so she starts to believe him. Back in Adam's world, the middle-aged Jonas' time machine doesn't work, and Martha uses her device to get out of there, leaving the others behind. Really? Is everyone betraying somebody in this show? show? Anyway, the alternate world, clueless Martha enters the caves in the tunnel with young Jonas. Yep, she's about to experience time travel. Moving on, we cut to 2053, where we find out that the time traveler Martha is working for Adam. It was he who asked her to fool middle-aged Jonas, and they both look at the God particle. And the scene cuts to clueless Martha and young Jonas, who have arrived in the future. And there's an unknown woman to welcome them. Don't tell me this other woman is Martha as well. The fourth episode kicks off in 1954, in Adam's world. We see that the middle-aged Egon is having an affair with Hannah. Yeah, you heard it right. She traveled from 2020 to 1954 to break up with Ulrich and start an affair with Egon. Next, we see young versions of Ines, Claudia, and Hannah talking to each other in the forest, and it seems like Agnes still hasn't returned home. Doris is worried about Agnes, and she tells Egon that a priest named Hanno Tober also disappeared at the same time. Yeah, this Hanno guy is Noah. That's his real name, apparently. While everyone's worried sick, Agnes is hanging out with Adam in 2053. They also talk about the origin of all this mess. So, jumping back to 2053, we see old Magnus meeting with the time traveler Martha, and he's sort of pissed at her for leaving them back in 1888, but it helped middle-aged Jonas become Adam, so it all worked out as planned, eh? Moving on, we learn that in the alternate world, young Jonas and clueless Martha have arrived in 2052, and that middle-aged woman, well, that's Martha. The middle-aged Martha tells the younger self about the apocalypse, which will happen in 2 days in Eva's timeline. Cut to 1954, in Adam's world, Hannah learns that she's pregnant with middle-aged Egon's child. Yeah, that's messed up. While Greta asks Egon to find Hanno Telber if he wants answers. On the same day, Doris goes to the church and meets the unknown men. She asks about Agnes, but they tell her to buzz off and worry about her own husband, who's having an affair. So they are relationship advisors as well, huh? Alright. On the same day, Hannah tells the middle-aged Egon about her pregnancy, and he does not take it well at all. Now we go back to 2052 in the alternate world, where middle-aged Martha tells young Jonas that he must prevent the apocalypse in Eva's world. He can't save both worlds, and he must choose this one to save everyone. And hey, he can still stay here and be with this world's Martha. Not the worst deal ever, is it? We then cut back to Adam's world, and everyone prepares Agnes so she can enter the God particle in 2053. Meanwhile, in 1987, young Tronte works with a young Yana in the forest, and they have a brief heart-to-heart moment, but then Claudia arrives to ruin it all. Back in 2052, the alternate world, young Jonas and clueless Martha enter the caves, and at the same time, the middle-aged version of Noah from the alternate world meets the middle-aged Martha. And it turns out that the two are working together. In 1987, in Adam's world, we see that Doris has finally decided to leave middle-aged Egon, and Hannah, who was about to get rid of the child, decides to keep it. Meanwhile, young Jonas and clueless Martha return to 2019 and realize that even if they are from different worlds, they still love each other. And well, they get intimate. And wait, before you start judging them, just think. Jonas doesn't even exist in the alternate world, so technically this world's Martha is not Jonas's aunt. So you guys are safe, as you were. Carry on. Next, we cut to 2053 in Adam's world, where Adam and the time traveler Martha continue their conversation. Adam tells Martha that Eva never wanted to prevent the apocalypse. Instead, Eva wanted to plant the seed through Jonas and her younger self. How? We just saw Martha from the alternate world and young Jonas from Adam's world getting intimate. Well, clueless Martha gets pregnant after this, and the child becomes the bridge between the two worlds. Get it? Adam is implying that young Jonas is clueless, Martha's child is the knot between the two worlds. Since Eva wants to preserve this knot, she wants the child to be born. Adam, however, wants to sever this knot, which means he must stop the child from being born. Whoa, that's heavy. But wait, that's not the real shocker. Apparently this child of young Jonas and clueless Martha is none other than the, wait for it, unknown man. Honestly, I didn't see that coming. Anywho, according to Adam, the unknown men, the origin, and yeah, he's the one who recorded the events in the Triquetra notebook. The fifth episode begins at Adam's world, where Claudia is burying Regina in 2020. Gosh, that must be heartbreaking for her. The episode now cuts to 2053, where Adam meets Charlotte and asks her to play her part in his grand scheme. According to Adam, it'll take only one more day for him to unravel the knot and destroy it. Adam also says that he'll beat Eva no matter what. not. In 1987, we see that Katharina is planning to get old Ulrich out of the psych ward, and on the same day, H.G. Tannhaus shows young Charlotte a picture of his son, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter. Tannhaus reveals that they died in a car accident, and while they found the bodies of his son and his daughter-in-law, the police never found the body of his granddaughter. Wait, why are they telling this now? Does Tannhaus's dead family play a part in all this? Interesting. And that same night before Tannhaus got this terrible news, 2 women came to him with Charlotte and left her with him. 2 women. I wonder who they were. Anyway, Charlotte storms out of there after learning this old dude isn't her real grandfather. In 2020, middle-aged Claudia meets a version of herself from the alternate world, who tells Claudia everything about Adam and Eva. And she says that Claudia must join Eva's side. Middle-aged Claudia from the alternate world says that Jonas must always open the passage in Adam's world, and the apocalypse must always happen. Meanwhile, in the alternate world, young Jonas and clueless Martha head towards the plant to stop the apocalypse. Jonas thinks he's found a way out of the loop, but then clueless Martha gets the same scratch as the time traveler Martha who brought young Jonas to this world. Up until this point, young Jonas thinks he's working against the time loop, and that's what Eva made him believe. But if that's really the case, how come clueless Martha gets the same scratch as the time traveler Martha? Young Jonas asks himself that same question, and he realizes that if he's still stuck in the loop, and Eva has lied that stopping the apocalypse is his way out. Back in 1987, in Adam's world, we see the young Charlotte sitting at the bus stop thinking about what she learned from Tannhaus. And right then, a young Peter arrives on the scene, and they both meet for the first time. Next, we cut to 2020, where we see that a man enters Peter and young Elisabeth's trailer, and he tries to Elisabeth. Peter arrives and tries to fight him, but he is killed. Right then, Elisabeth grabs a fire extinguisher and kills the man by smashing his brains out. Serves you right, asshole. Meanwhile, middle-aged Charlotte and middle-aged Elisabeth enter the God Particle in 2053. And in 2020, in the alternate world, Claudia gives a middle-aged Claudia from Adam's world the Triquetra notebook, which mentions every past and future event. Oh, and that's how Claudia from Adam's world got this notebook? Moving on, Eva's Claudia asks Adam's Claudia to guide Jonas in Adam's world, and then betray him. Why? Because that's what Claudia has always done in Adam's world, and she must do it again to preserve the knot. Cut to 1987, and we see Katharina is all set to break old Ulrich out of the psych ward, but first she must steal the key card from the warden in the psych ward. And guess what? This warden is none other than Katharina's mother, Helena Albers. The entire thing leads to a fight, and Katharina gets killed by Helena. Ines and Michael now return to their home, where Katharina was hiding before. You know, getting killed by her own mother. Just when I thought it couldn't get any more depressing. Meanwhile, young Jonas and clueless Martha enter Eva's place in the alternate world. Jonas wants to return to his world after realizing that Eva was using him. But then Eva says he can't return, and his work in this world is done. And by work, Eva means that Jonas has already impregnated clueless Martha. Then the middle-aged Martha and another young version of Martha arrive. Wait, hold on. So there are 4 Marthas in the scene. There's the clueless Martha, who just slept with young Jonas. There's middle-aged Martha, who's working with Eva. Then there's another young version of Martha, who just got a bigger scar on her face. And of course, there's Eva, who technically is the old Martha. Jeez, I mean, I like Martha, but that's just a lot of Marthas. Anyway, moving back to the show, the young version of Martha raises her gun, and just like that, she shoots Jonas. Dude, what the hell? So Eva kills Jonas in her world, and Adam kills Martha in his world, and this all seems like a part of a plan. The 6th episode begins in 2053, where Adam has locked the time traveler Martha in a cage. Just in case you forgot, this is the version of Martha who brought Jonas into the alternate world. Moving back to the alternate world in 2019, clueless Martha washes Jonas's blood off her hands. Martha is terrified, so she tells Magnus about the apocalypse, but he doesn't believe her. Clueless Martha then changes her look, and now she looks crazy like the time traveler Martha. She meets Katharina and gets ready to leave. We cut to 2020 in Adam's world, where middle-aged Claudia enters the nuclear plant and sees a small ball of light. It seems a little different from the God particle. Anyway, at the same point, a young Jonas arrives there and asks Claudia to stop. Wait, hold on, how is he alive? What the hell's happening? Moving on, Eva, in the alternate world, explains that there's some sort of switch between the infinite loop of time in one reality. Young Jonas is brought into this world by the time traveler Martha and dies. And in another world, Martha does not bring young Jonas to the alternate world, and he lives. Basically, both realities exist simultaneously, and this phenomenon is called quantum entanglement. Apparently, Adam is trying to destroy this quantum entanglement so he can disconnect the worlds. Why? Well, because destroying the quantum entanglement will also destroy the knot between the two worlds. It's all connected. Okay, before moving ahead, let's simplify this real quick. In one reality, young Jonas is saved from the apocalypse by the time traveler Martha, but he is killed by another young Martha in the alternate world. However, in the second reality, time traveler Martha does not arrive to save young Jonas in Adam's world, but Jonas survives the apocalypse on his own. Basically, the second young Jonas doesn't even know about the alternate world, and he has never met Eva or the time traveler Martha. And this second version of young Jonas, who has only experienced Martha's death, meets middle-aged Claudia in 2020. Alright, let's get back into it then. So second young Jonas is frustrated after Martha's death, and the God particle won't work because he doesn't know how to operate the machine. But Claudia agrees to help him prevent all of this from happening again. Back in the alternate world, clueless Martha now tells Bartosz everything, including the fact that something in the nuclear plant will cause the apocalypse. Meanwhile, alternate Ulrich confronts alternate Helga about everything, since the old man confesses to killing Mads. Helga says that he killed the boy in the past and dropped his body in the future using a wormhole. Even after hearing all this, Ulrich lets Helga leave because he wants to follow the old dude and see if he's telling the truth. Only an hour remains until the apocalypse in the alternate world. Clueless Martha and Bartosz plan on stopping Alexander from opening the containers at the plant. Around the same time, Alexander calls Charlotte and asks her to come to the plant. We then cut to Adam's world, where Adam sends the old Magnus and old Francesca to the alternate world through the God particle. Older versions of Magnus and Francesca from Adam's world find clueless Martha and Bartosz from the alternate world. Magnus and Francesca tell clueless Martha that Jonas is alive in their world and she must save him to stop the apocalypse in Adam's world. Clueless Martha then leaves with Magnus and Francesca, leaving her world behind. Gosh, it's like they are really nothing but pawns of time. Then we see that Eva has gathered Martha, Bartosz, Noah, Egon, and Claudia from her world, and she asks them to play their part. At the same time, Adam reveals to time traveler Martha that he wants to kill Martha's unborn child. But to kill the child, he has to use the energy of the apocalypse from both worlds. And once that happens, both worlds will erase each other. Man, it is so damn complicated, I can't even think of a funny comment. Anywho, Adam is ready to use the God particle to kill the time traveler Martha, or only her child, I guess. I don't know. Meanwhile, we see a montage of three unknown men arriving in different worlds. The old one and the young one are together, and the middle-aged one is alone, but they are all going to the nuclear plant. Meanwhile, old Bartosz meets young Bartosz in the alternate world, and old Noah brings young Elizabeth to the bunker, where she meets young Noah, old Egon, and meets Adam's world Hannah, who's bleeding from below. And during all this, Charlotte and Alexander open the canister at the nuclear plant. Damn, so much is happening all at once. Slow the hell down. Finally, the apocalypse occurs in the alternate world, while the time traveler Martha receives lightning strikes from the God particle in Adam's world. The 7th episode begins with a brief lesson on parallel worlds, in which a young H.G. Tannhaus explains that multiple realities with different outcomes can coexist. Then we see a world where a time traveler Martha saves a young Jonas from the apocalypse, where another, young Bartosz, arrives and stops time traveler Martha from meeting Jonas, who survives on his own. The episode then cuts to 1974 in Adam's world, where we see a young H.G. Tannhaus mourning over his dead family, who died in an accident. He then arrives at the bunker, and it seems he wants to bring his family back from the dead. We now jump to 2021, where we see Noah, a young Noah, taking care of a young Elizabeth after Peter's death, and they are both digging the tunnel inside the caves. We then cut to 1890, where middle-aged Jonas is trying to create the God particle, but a lightning strike from the particle hurts his arm. Oh, he's starting to become Adam. Around the same time, Bartosz walks out into the forest, where he meets a girl whom he saw working for Adam. The girl reveals that her name is Celia. Next, we are in 2023, where young Jonas and middle-aged Claudia are trying to create the God particle by using the machine. It doesn't work, so Jonas decides decides to leave. Leave this planet, man. That's the only escape for you. Jonas tries to hang himself in the same spot where his father died. Dude is tired. I get it, but there must be another option. Fortunately, young Noah arrives on the scene and saves Jonas. Young Noah explains that the older self of Jonas already exists in the future, so time won't let Jonas die in the past. Get it? Time won't let you die in the past if you already exist in the future. Anyway, Noah says that Jonas must fulfill the promise about taking everyone to paradise. Yup, an older version of Jonas makes that promise to an older version of Noah. Moving on, young Noah then takes young Jonas to the passage that Noah and Elisabeth found and have been digging since 2021. Now we cut to 1904, where Celia and Bartosz have a child together. That's right, these two got married after meeting each other in 1890, and guess what? Celia names their newborn child Hanno. Okay, Hanno is Noah's name, so Noah is Bartosz's son. Yep, makes sense to me. Finally, we cut back to 1974, where Tannhaus is working on a time machine device, and he spends years working on it in the bunker. Alright, things are moving way too fast, but it feels like every piece of the puzzle is starting to kind of click together, and this is just the beginning, so strap in because we are about to see a lot, and I mean a lot of stuff happen all at one time. Okay, so next we see that young Noah and young Jonas and middle-aged Claudia are finally able to create the God particle by 2040. They have been working on it since 2020, so it takes them 20 hellish years to stabilize the God particle. And yes, they have all aged significantly. Anyway, they should all be happy, but Noah and Jonas think Claudia is hiding something. And well, they're not wrong, as Claudia has been taking orders from Eva through an alternate version of herself. But Claudia is a badass, and she realizes that both Adam and Eva are lying. So she kills Claudia from the alternate world and uses her device to arrive in the alternate world. She meets Eva, who doesn't know that her world's Claudia is dead. Eva gives this Claudia the blueprint for the time machine and says it must reach Tannhaus. Oh, so that's why old Claudia gave this very blueprint to Tannhaus the first season. Moving on, in 1910, we see that Sia has died after giving birth to a girl who she named Agnes. So Noah and Agnes are sibling... Oh, wait, right. We already knew that. Next, we then cut to 2041, where middle-aged Charlotte and middle-aged Elisabeth are arriving from 2053. By this time, younger Elisabeth and Noah have given birth to a child who we all know is Charlotte. While 2041's Elizabeth talks to Noah about Charlotte's future, Noah and Elisabeth from 2053 steal the child. Oh, okay, so these two women are the ones who take the child, Charlotte, to Tannhaus. Okay, cool. Moving on, Tannhaus turns on the time machine in 1986 for the very first time, and in 1911, Hannah arrives with her child to meet Jonas. Oh, and yeah, Hannah reveals that the child's name is Zia. Remember Bartosz's wife? Middle-aged Jonas, who has messed up his skin with time travel, meets his sister and mother. He's emotional, but he's confused as well. Middle-aged Jonas then asks Hannah how exactly she found him. Hannah says that it was an old woman named Eva who asked Hannah to meet Jonas. Okay, I don't like where this is going. Moving on, middle-aged Jonas knows that Sia grows up in the future timeline without Hannah. So Hannah doesn't belong here, and she won't let Jonas take Zia away. So middle-aged Jonas kills Hannah by choking her with a pillow. And that is brutal. And Jonas, you're messed up, my friend. Moving on, it's 1920. So 9 years have passed since Hannah's death, and middle-aged Jonas has successfully fully become Adam. Middle-aged Noah, who lost Charlotte in 2041, is traveling across time to find his daughter, and his search leads him to Adam in 1920. And Adam says that Claudia is the one who took Charlotte away from him. You know, that's a lie, and it was you who asked middle-aged Elizabeth and middle-aged Charlotte in 2053 to kidnap child Charlotte from 2041. Anyway, Adam then asks Noah to find the last pages from the Triquetra notebook if he wants to find Charlotte. Next, we cut to 2052, where middle-aged Claudia has grown old. She asks middle-aged Jonas to lead younger Jonas on the same path. That's why middle-aged Jonas travels back to 2019 when we see him for the first time as the stranger. And now every piece is where it should be, and basically everything that we have seen so far and seen before has happened again. While this is going on, Bartosz from the alternate world brings clueless Martha to meet Eva, who gives Martha the same scar as her. So the clueless Martha has now become the young Martha who kills Jonas. Back at Adam's world, the God particle swallows the time traveler Martha, but the world still remains. Adam always thought that Martha's child was the origin, but the God particle stops the child from ever being born. So the knot must be severed, but it isn't, because Adam is clearly shocked and he sees Claudia. You thought you were the player? No. Yeah, no, it's Claudia, my friend. The final episode of Dark starts with old Claudia telling Adam that it wasn't his or Eva's world that was the origin. It was a third world. Yes, it was H.G. Tannhaus who created these two worlds while trying to bring back his family. So his world is the origin world. Oh man, we finally know the origin. Thank goodness. Claudia then explains that both Adam and Eva are stuck in a loop. He has tried to destroy this origin an infinite number of times, and Martha will always kill Jonas to save her child. But this meeting between old Claudia and Adam is happening for the first time. Oh, also, it was Claudia who asked Tronte to kill Regina back in 2020 to ease Regina's pain. She lied to both Eva and Adam, so everything repeats itself in both worlds, and she'll get all the time in the world to find the true origin. After a lot of hustle, Claudia finally learns that during the apocalypse, time stands still for a fraction of a second, and that there is the loophole, which will allow them to change the events in the origin world. Claudia then says that Adam should send young Jonas to the origin world, like how Eva sends Martha to different worlds. Adam then uses this device to save Jonas from the apocalypse in 2020, and he brings Jonas to Eva's world. Adam asks Jonas to save Martha right before the apocalypse in the alternate world. When time stands still, Adam says that both Martha and Jonas must go to the origin world to stop Tannhaus from creating the time machine. As planned, Jonas saves Martha and brings her to the origin world. The date is June 21st, 1986, the day that Tannhaus uses the device and creates the other two worlds. Now Jonas and Martha enter the cave so they can travel back in time and save Tannhaus's family, so he never creates the machine. Meanwhile, Adam meets Eva in her world, where he is always supposed to kill Eva, but this time Adam breaks the cycle and doesn't kill her. At the same time, Tannhaus turns on the machine for the very first time, which sends Martha and Jonas to 1971, when Tannhaus's family, his son Marek, his daughter-in-law Sonia, and his granddaughter are still alive. Marek has an argument with Tannhaus because the old dude only talks about Bing Bang and that sort of stuff. So Marek leaves with his wife and daughter in the middle of the night. Yup, they have an accident that night, which Martha and Jonas want to prevent. Moving on, Marek is driving while being completely pissed at his father, and then Martha and Jonas suddenly teleport in the middle of the road. Risky, but it works. Martha and Jonas convince Marek to drive back home by acting like a couple of weirdos. Marek returns to his father, and they have an emotional moment together. So Tannhaus's family doesn't die that night. Oh, also, at this point, we learn that Marek and Sonia's daughter is named Charlotte. Coincidence? Well, I hope so. Anywho, this family never dies, so Tannhaus never creates the machine in the future, which means Martha and Jonas's worlds are erased from existence. Almost everyone we saw in this story simply gets erased. That is heavy stuff, man. But hey, some characters do survive in this world, like Hannah, Katharina, Peter, and Regina. Oh, and by the way, Hannah is pregnant, and she thinks if it's a boy, she'll name him Jonas. Alright guys, well that's it for this video, and for all the time travel stuff and headache that it might have caused, I think I've had enough of it. But if you still have space for other good, complicated stories, click the video on the screen right about now. Please like, subscribe, and comment, and do all those other awesome things you people do, and I will see you next time. Bye.